The first words they said to me weren't welcome. They were, "You don't belong here." It still stings to remember it. How their voices curled around those 4 words like a snake, hissing into my ear before I'd even set down my bag. My name is Anna Mitchell. I was 32 years old the morning I walked through the glossy glass doors of Pinnacle Marketing, clutching a tote bag with my only good blazer folded inside. I'd worked 3 jobs to get this chance. I thought I'd feel proud when I stepped into that lobby. Instead, I felt small. The receptionist barely looked up when I gave my name. "New associate?" she asked flatly, tapping her long pink nails on the counter. Before I could answer, a woman in a sharp black suit appeared beside me. Claire. She didn't introduce herself, didn't offer her hand. She just glanced me up and down, taking in my department store shoes, the slight tremor in my fingers, and turned to the receptionist with a smirk. "She's the one they pulled from that regional office?" Claire said, her voice pitched just loud enough for me to hear. "Well, let's hope she can keep up." I told myself not to take it personally, but I did. The elevator ride to the 24th floor felt longer than any commute I'd ever had. When the doors opened, I stepped out into a sea of navy suits and hushed laughter. They all seemed to know one another already, leaning over cubicle walls to share inside jokes, sipping lattes from the cafe downstairs. No one looked at me, no one except Nathan, who lifted an eyebrow when he spotted me standing uncertainly in the corridor. "You're Anna, right?" he asked. For a split second, I thought he might be kind. Then his lips twisted into a half smile. "You don't belong here." He turned away before I could reply. I set my tote bag down by my new desk, tiny, wedged into a corner behind the copier, as if someone had decided that even my workspace should remind me I was an outsider. I tried to steady my breathing. I'd spent years fighting to get out of small-town offices where everyone knew my father's bankruptcy, where people assumed I'd fail just like he did. I'd promised myself that if I ever got the chance, I would show them what I was capable of, but I hadn't expected the chance to come wrapped in disdain. Denise introduced herself only because she had to. She pushed a stack of onboarding papers across the desk without sitting down. "You'll want to read the handbook carefully. Some people, take longer to learn." She tapped the folder, her eyes meeting mine with something between pity and contempt. I nodded, though my throat felt too tight to speak. When I finally looked around, I realized almost everyone was watching. Not overtly. No, they were too polished for that. But I caught the sideways glances, the whispers behind manicured hands. All I could think was, "You've worked too hard to crumble now." I unpacked my things in silence. A framed photo of my mom and me from my college graduation. A pen set I'd bought as a little ritual of optimism. As I lined them up on the cheap particle board, my heart was hammering so loud I thought they'd hear it. That afternoon, Claire called me over to her desk. She pointed to a set of client files I hadn't seen yet. "Think you can handle this?" she asked sweetly. When I nodded, she laughed. "We'll see." By the end of that first day, I had learned exactly what they thought of me. I was the charity hire, the underdog who didn't fit the mold, the woman they'd decided to watch fail. But as I rode the elevator back down to the street, clutching my empty lunch bag, I looked at my reflection in the mirrored doors and made myself a promise. You belong wherever you decide you do, and someday they would understand that too. The next morning, I came in early, hoping to find a few minutes to settle in before the others arrived. But the office was already half full. Claire perched on the edge of Denise's desk, coffee cup in hand, both of them laughing about some client dinner I hadn't been invited to. I tried to look busy, scrolling through onboarding documents while listening to the unspoken rules of the place. Don't sit in the corner conference room. That was for senior associates. Don't use the good coffee machine. That was for managers. Don't ask questions at the Monday meeting unless you're invited. I'd never worked somewhere that prided itself so much on appearances. Back at my old regional agency, everyone pitched in. Junior staff, admins, even the interns. Here, I realized, The hierarchy was a fortress. My first real test came 3 days in, when Denise stopped by my desk with an armful of folders. "You'll need to prepare the monthly campaign performance summary," she said, "by tomorrow." I looked at the stack, hundreds of pages of analytics, trend reports, and invoices. "Tomorrow?" I repeated. Denise smiled thinly. "It's standard." I knew it wasn't. I'd watched her pass that task off to a different junior associate the day before, giving them a full week to finish, but I thanked her and waited until she left to drop my head into my hands. I stayed late that night, long after the cleaners arrived. My stomach growled, but I couldn't make myself leave. Not when I knew they were waiting for me to fail. Around 10, the janitor came through with his cart, Luis, a quiet man with kind eyes. He nodded to me as he emptied the wastebasket. "Long day?" he asked softly. I smiled tiredly. "Long week." He looked around to be sure no one else was listening. "Don't let them see you break," he said. "They're not worth it." It was the first moment of kindness I'd felt in that building. When I finally turned in the reports the next morning, Denise barely glanced at them. "Fine," she said, as if I'd only done what was expected. But I saw the flicker of surprise when she realized everything was correct. It didn't matter, though. I was invisible again by lunch. Later that week, I made a small error, an outdated statistic in a client presentation. I double-checked everything, but I must have missed it in the late-night haze. The next morning, Claire called me out in front of the entire team. "You can't cut corners here," she said coolly. "Maybe you're used to more relaxed standards, but that won't fly." I felt my cheeks burn as everyone turned to stare. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "It won't happen again." Denise sighed dramatically, as if the whole thing were tedious. Nathan looked away, hiding a smirk. For the rest of the day, every step felt heavier than the last. Each email I sent felt like a test I was doomed to fail. That night, when I got home, I closed my bedroom door, buried my face in a pillow, and cried until my ribs ached. But when the tears stopped, I pulled out the battered journal I'd kept since college. I wrote in block letters across the page, "I will not quit. Even if I had to work twice as hard for half the credit, I wouldn't give them the satisfaction." The next few weeks blurred into a constant test of endurance. Every day I came in early and stayed late, determined to learn everything I could. If they were going to watch me, I would give them something worth seeing. I started printing out reports to study during lunch. I memorized past campaign data and the preferences of every major client. If they were going to pick apart my work, at least I'd know I'd given it everything I had. It wasn't glamorous, eating vending machine pretzels alone in the break room, but it felt like progress. One evening, while I was reviewing last year's quarterly forecasts, Helen, the senior admin assistant, came over with a fresh cup of coffee. "You're still here?" she asked, sounding more concerned than surprised. "I'm trying to get up to speed," I admitted. "It feels like everyone else already knows everything." Helen set the cup down beside me. "They don't," she said kindly. "They just pretend better." Her words sank into me like sunlight after a long winter. It was Helen who first told me about the struggling Holloway account, a major client that had been threatening to leave for months. No one on Claire's team had been able to turn it around, so I started researching after hours. I read every Holloway case study I could find, analyzed their competitors, and mapped out what I would do differently if it were my responsibility. I wasn't naive. I knew they'd never let me present my ideas. But the work gave me something to hold on to. Late one Friday, as I was leaving with my notes stuffed into my bag, Nathan caught me by the elevators. "Still trying to impress everyone?" he asked, his smile tight. "No," I said quietly. "Just trying to do my job." He didn't reply, but his gaze lingered on the papers in my hand. The following Monday, Denise came by my desk again, tossing a thin folder at me. "Client background," she said dismissively. "Not that it'll help." I recognized the name on the cover, Holloway Industries. My heart sped up. That afternoon, Claire called a meeting to discuss the account. I sat in the corner, silent, while they bickered over budgets and creative proposals. When Claire asked if anyone had suggestions, the room went quiet. No one spoke. I opened my mouth, then closed it. But Helen caught my eye across the table and gave a tiny, encouraging nod. I took a breath. "I have some thoughts," I said, my voice trembling, "if you'd like to hear them." Claire didn't look up from her phone. "Make it quick." I laid out my plan: targeted digital outreach, a refreshed brand message, and a tighter timeline. My hands were shaking, but I kept going until I'd said everything I'd rehearsed in my head 100 times. When I finished, the room was silent again. Then slowly, Nathan spoke. "That could work." It was the first time anyone had agreed with me about anything. Claire didn't say thank you. She didn't even acknowledge that the idea had come from me. But later that afternoon, she sent a memo to the team outlining the proposal, almost word for word. I sat at my desk staring at the email, my pulse roaring in my ears. A small win, I told myself. A first crack in the wall they'd built around me. That night, when I left the office, the air felt different, lighter somehow. For the first time since my first day, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I had a chance. 2 weeks later, the Holloway campaign launched. I wasn't invited to the client meetings or the celebratory dinners when the initial results exceeded expectations. I knew my name wasn't mentioned in any of the calls with the executive team. But when I saw the metrics rolling in, higher engagement, stronger conversion rates than the firm had seen in years, I felt something in my chest uncoil. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't been naive. My ideas worked. The others pretended not to notice. Claire called me in to review some routine reports like nothing had changed. Denise avoided eye contact. Nathan still looked right through me. But every so often, when they thought I wasn't watching, I'd catch them glancing in my direction, their expressions tight with something like suspicion or resentment. That was when I realized it wasn't that they truly believed I was incompetent, it was that they were afraid that if I proved myself, they'd have to question why they'd spent so long trying to keep me down. It was almost liberating, but the real test came sooner than I could have imagined. A month later, Pinnacle's biggest account, Brookridge Media, threatened to walk away. The CEO himself called an emergency meeting on a Sunday afternoon. I sat in the back of the glass-walled conference room, clutching a legal pad, while the senior associates fought to assign blame. Claire blamed Denise. Denise blamed Nathan. Nathan blamed the interns. No one offered solutions. After 2 hours of circular arguments, the CEO, Mr. Lawrence, rubbed his temples and looked around the table. "Does anyone have an actual plan to save this contract?" Silence. I felt my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst through my ribs. I didn't want to speak. God, I didn't. But I also couldn't sit there and pretend I hadn't spent the past week drafting a strategy in case this exact scenario happened. I cleared my throat. "Sir, I might have some ideas." The entire room turned to look at me. Claire's mouth dropped open. "This is not the time." Mr. Lawrence held up a hand. "Go ahead." I took a breath and began laying out my proposal. A combination of restructured deliverables, targeted rebranding, and a rapid response PR campaign to reassure Brookridge's board. At first, I spoke too fast, tripping over my words. But then something shifted. My voice steadied. My focus narrowed until I could only see the CEO's face as he listened intently, nodding along. When I finished, the silence was deafening. Claire looked like she'd swallowed glass. Mr. Lawrence set down his pen. "That's the first constructive approach I've heard all day," he said. "Anna, I'd like you to put this together in a formal deck and present it to the client team tomorrow morning." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "Yes, sir," I managed to say. As the others filed out, Claire lingered behind. For a moment, I thought she might congratulate me, maybe even apologize for the months she'd spent trying to crush me. Instead, she leaned in close, her perfume sharp and cloying. "You'll embarrass yourself," she hissed, "and when you do, don't think anyone will save you." I met her stare, and for the first time, I didn't look away. "We'll see," I said softly. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up in my tiny apartment, building slides and memorizing every talking point until dawn. By sunrise, I was too tired to be scared anymore. The morning of the Brookridge presentation, I arrived an hour early. My hands trembled as I set up the projector. Arranging the slides I'd refined until they were polished to a shine, Claire walked in with Denise and Nathan, whispering behind a stack of folders. They didn't offer to help. They didn't even look at me. But when Mr. Lawrence entered the room with the Brookridge executives trailing behind him, I saw something flicker across Claire's face, a flicker that looked uncomfortably close to fear. I began my presentation. At first, my voice was too quiet, and I could feel my palms sweating. But then I remembered every late night I'd spent studying, every time I'd been told I wasn't good enough, every moment they'd tried to make me feel small. I lifted my chin and spoke louder. 20 minutes later, when I clicked to the final slide, the head of Brookridge leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. "This is impressive," he said. I exhaled, a shaky rush of relief. Mr. Lawrence nodded. "We'll be implementing this plan immediately." He turned to me. "Excellent work, Anna." No one spoke as the Brookridge team filed out. Claire's face was pale. Denise wouldn't meet my eyes. Nathan stared at the table. For the first time since my first day, I felt like I wasn't just surviving. I was finally being seen. That afternoon, the rumors started. Helen found me in the break room, a sympathetic look on her face. "Word is they're considering you for the head of marketing role," she whispered. I felt my heart skip. "That can't be right," I said automatically. Helen smiled faintly. "You saved the firm's biggest account. You'd be the obvious choice." I wanted to feel proud. I wanted to feel triumphant. But mostly I felt braced, like I was waiting for the next blow to fall. And it did. The sabotage began almost immediately. First, my project files disappeared from the shared drive. When I finally recovered them, I found edits I hadn't made, errors that made me look careless. Then, an anonymous email circulated to the partners, suggesting I'd stolen credit for the Brookridge proposal. I knew exactly who was behind it, but I had no proof. One evening, as I was packing up, Claire appeared in the doorway. "Enjoy this while it lasts," she said, her smile thin as paper. "You're just a distraction, a novelty." I stood up slowly. "I don't care what you think of me," I told her, my voice steady. "I care about what I do." Her eyes narrowed. "You really believe you deserve this, don't you?" "I do," I said simply. For a moment, she looked almost startled. Then she turned on her heel and left without another word. I sank back into my chair, my pulse roaring in my ears. I hadn't realized until that moment how much power I'd given their opinions, how much I'd measured my worth by their approval, or their scorn, no more. If they wanted a fight, I would give them one. And I would win. The days leading up to the year-end meeting felt like walking a tightrope. I kept my head down and did my work, even as the whispers grew louder. I heard my name spoken in the hallways, saw the speculative looks whenever I passed by. One morning, Nathan stopped me outside the elevator. For a moment, I thought he might offer some grudging respect. "Don't get comfortable," he said instead. "People like you never last." People like me. I didn't ask him what he meant. I didn't need to. I spent every night at my kitchen table updating proposals and studying metrics until my eyes burned. I knew the stakes. I knew what it would cost me to fail. The morning of the announcement, I woke up before dawn. My hands shook as I buttoned my navy suit, the one I'd saved for something special. I arrived early, the conference room still empty. I stood by the window overlooking the city, thinking about all the nights I'd driven past these towers and wondered if I'd ever be allowed to step inside. And now I was here. By the time the staff gathered, the air was thick with anticipation. Mr. Lawrence stepped up to the front holding a folder. "As you all know, this year has tested us," he began, "but it has also revealed who we can depend on." His eyes moved over the crowd, resting on me for just a heartbeat. "I'm pleased to announce a leadership change," he said. "Effective immediately, the new head of marketing will be Anna Mitchell." For one long, suspended moment, no one moved. I felt my breath catch in my throat. Claire looked stricken, her mouth opening soundlessly. Denise stared at the floor. Nathan's face went slack with disbelief. And then, slowly, people began to clap. Not everyone, but enough. I stood up on unsteady legs, every cell in my body electric. Mr. Lawrence extended his hand. "Congratulations," he said warmly. "You've earned this." I managed to thank him, though my voice was hoarse. As I turned to face the room, a hush fell. All those eyes, the same ones that had watched me with contempt, pity, dismissal, were on me now. Only this time, they couldn't pretend I didn't belong. As I walked to the front of the room to accept the position, my gaze locked with Claire's. She looked away first. I thought I would feel triumphant, but mostly I felt something quieter, something steadier. I felt free. Later, after the meeting broke up, Helen found me by my desk. "Told you," she said with a grin. "Obvious choice." I laughed, an incredulous, shaky laugh that felt like it had been waiting to escape for months. As the office slowly emptied out for the day, I sat alone in my new chair, the one with the brass nameplate already engraved with my title. I thought about the first day I'd walked in and how certain everyone had been that I would fail. And then I thought about every late night, every humiliation, every moment I'd nearly given up. It was worth it, all of it.